One of the great orthodoxies of the modern age, if you go and hear any motivational or inspirational speaker, is never give up. Never give up. And I think they're wrong.
Well, it all depends what you're doing. If you're holding off the Zulus at Rorke's Drift, yes, by all means never give up. But in business, sometimes there's a moment where you should give up. And I think that the motivational speakers and those who suggest that you push on at all costs under all circumstances are the modern equivalent of those generals in World War I who kept sending men over the top into muddy fields where they're going to get mowed down by machine guns.
Well, before we get into the essence of today's chat, John, I just wanted to very briefly have a look at why some of these motivational or inspirational speakers say the things that they do. And I think it falls into two reasons. Firstly, the guys who've never actually done anything themselves, they're just salesmen and they're telling people what they want to hear. And people go along and pay a vast sum of money for the feel-good factor, that warm, fuzzy feeling that they come away for a few days feeling terribly inspired, but without having scrutinised what they've been told, thrown stones at it and seeing whether they go through or bounce off. The other type of speaker you get is the person who has done it and has succeeded against all odds. Now, what do we mean when we say someone has succeeded against the odds? Well, let's imagine there are 10 entrepreneurs, one of whom succeeds and 9 who fail. The one who succeeds is the one who succeeded against the odds. They're the one you get to hear. The poor 9 who didn't succeed don't get invited to give motivational speeches at seminars to become millionaires. They don't get up on stage there. So you hear the guy who's succeeded, or the woman who succeeded, and they will tell you why they did it and how they did it by never giving up. And in their situation, in those circumstances, maybe they were right never to give up. But for other people, there's a time to get out. And there's a time to get out before you make things an awful lot worse.
Yes, I always remember the case of the author, Daniel Defoe, who later wrote Robinson Crusoe, of course. And he was a very successful entrepreneur. And then, of course, the day came where he got into a business which seemed a good proposition at the time, and it started losing money, and he put more money into it, and more, and he just lost it and lost it and lost it, and he went horribly bankrupt. And those, of course, were in the days when you couldn't discharge yourself as a bankrupt.
And you get sent to debtor's prison.
Absolutely, he did twice. And he had to spend the rest of his life writing. They estimate he wrote over 500 works, basically to pay his debts off. And his advice was, if I had known, my advice would be, break soon. And there is a point in any business where you have to decide whether or not it is viable that you continue. It's not as bad as Daniel Defoe's day. There is no debtor's prison. You can be discharged even if you go bankrupt, and as we'll see in a minute, that's avoidable. But at a certain moment, you have to consider whether or not you must swallow your pride and say, this particular business is not working out.
And is never going to do so. And I think the entrepreneur is faced with, of all the dilemmas, I think this has got to be very near, if not at the top of the list of dilemmas to face, because you do have to have a degree of perseverance beyond normal human mortality.
Absolutely.
To succeed. And it is a matter of absolutely fine judgment. I mean, I look back to my postal service in Russia. There were times when clearly the obvious and sensible thing to do was to pack in. And ultimately I did pack in, not because it had gone bust, but just because it wasn't worth the effort anymore. But I succeeded because I persevered and I kept fighting and I wouldn't give up. One thing after another would go wrong. I would be the person who tried to find the solution, who persevered, who carried on when other people gave up. But there comes a stage, and whether it's apparent to you or not, that business is never going to succeed. No matter what you do, there's nothing that you can do to make it succeed. That's the time to get out, where the inevitable, with that foresight that we've spoken about, it's inevitable that not only are you going to run out of money, you're going to get in very, very serious debts. And this invariably happens to people who are not financially literate. They wait until they can't juggle the bills around anymore and wangle more credit out of people, and they've been insolvent for far longer than they should need to have been. and you can get out without making things that awfully much worse.
It's not only the right practical decision, it's the right ethical decision. Because I think we've all been there. And by the way, if this sounds depressing, it shouldn't be, because all entrepreneurs at some point or other will go through this long, dark night of the soul. If you haven't done so yet, you're going to at some point in your career as a businessman. It happens. But there does come a moment where you say to yourself, right, I can carry on borrowing money to try and prop up this failing business, so that when the business goes down, I will lose my investors even more money than I currently owe. Or I can draw a line under it and minimize not only my losses, but of course the losses of the people who are putting money into the business. And at that moment, the right decision, the ethical decision, is to say, well, hold on, I don't want to lose any more of my money. I don't want to lose any more of anybody else's money either. And at that moment, then you have to say to yourself, right, I'm closing the business, and you must accept the losses that you've made, but be grateful that you haven't made more.
And be grateful for the experience you've had, and learn from what went wrong.
Absolutely. As we've said before, a man who fails in business but learns from it has actually become a more effective businessman as a result than one who succeeds but doesn't know why. Next time round, he is far more likely to succeed in his business than he was before. And there will be a next time round.
Providing he's reflected.
Absolutely. This is one of the reasons, I think, why capitalism triumphed over communism in the Cold War. The fact that we had this mechanism by which we could say, right, this particular use of the entrepreneur's time, the time of his employees, the capital put into the business, the land and other natural resources that the business is taking up, this particular use of all those resources is not working out. All of these resources can be employed more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a moral duty to say, right, I will release those resources, including, incidentally, your own time and your own enterprise. You may not succeed in this business, but applying your skills to another business, you may succeed yourself. And you have a duty to use your own skills to their maximum efficiency.
So what does happen when things go wrong? You start with, you're reaching your decision that the business is not going to succeed and it's time to get out. Now, if you're lucky, or if you're wise, I think more than lucky, if you're wise and you're financially literate, you will see it before it's too late. You will still have some money in the bank, your cash flow will still be positive, you've been plotting that on a graph every month or even every day, and you get out before it crosses into the red zone.
Very few people do, unfortunately. They do hang on too long. Everybody does.
But you can get out early, you can say, right, this is what's happening, and you can discharge your responsibilities with a degree of responsibility. That you make sure there's enough money to, you give people their notice, and you can pay them off and give them redundancy pay if needs be, and you can make sure all your creditors are paid off, and you can manage your affairs so you suddenly don't just shut up shop one day, and the people who've paid for goods actually get their goods delivered rather than, sorry, you're a trade creditor, you've lost your money.
Right, you've got to be a bit careful here. Now, let's separate corporate insolvency and bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, corporate insolvency, if you're at all intelligent, as you say, you will almost certainly be operating through a limited company.
Mm-hmm.
If your company is wound up, it then goes into the hands of a receiver.
Well, the first thing is that an administrator is appointed, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they first of all see if the business can be saved.
Yes, but hopefully you as an entrepreneur will have done everything possible to save the business first, and by the stage that you have to get out yourself, everything possible should have been done by you.
Uh-huh.
So that's not really a relevant issue at this point. But in that event, the corporate assets are then divided according to a very strict schedule established by law. For example, the taxman usually gets the first priority, typically, then your employees, then your creditors in order. Now, that is not necessarily the order in which you want to pay people off.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're clever, what you'll have done is made sure that your employees and your trade creditors are well taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
The importance of that, of course, is that you may want to do business with these people again in future under another company.
And it might, depending on your own ethics and your own values, but you might decide that there are a lot more deserving causes than the swine of a taxman.
Absolutely. So you've got to be a bit careful. if you're seen to be being too preferential in the months immediately before your insolvency,
That could be regarded as fraud. Yeah.
yes, so you've got to be a bit careful, but do not, whatever you do, leave trade creditor in the lurch if you can possibly avoid it. They will remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, as I say, if you are going bankrupt or going insolvent, you probably will start up a business again one day and you will need their goodwill.